Okay. Hi, I'm Sean Kidney, CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative. Today, I've got the pleasure of talking with Professor Fan from the Academy of Global Food Economics and Policy. And we're going to talk about the relationship between food production, food supply chains, agriculture, and climate, and the mobilisation of capital for climate action, which is what I work on. Professor Fan, or Shenggen, if I can call you that.
Sure.
Thanks for the time, and fun to talk. I want to ask you first, from the point of view of your work, and you're involved in so many aspects of agriculture and food supply chain around the world, what are the biggest challenges we face in the near future and the biggest priorities? And because I'm interested for my stakeholder base who are investors all around the world about what they need to prioritise in. What's your message to them?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sean. And I think right now we're facing actually several challenges. I think the biggest challenges remain poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Mm-hmm. So globally, we still have more than 700 million people who suffer from hunger, who do not have enough to eat. I think part of that dimension is also so-called hidden hunger, lack of micronutrients. So although you may have enough to eat, so basically out of hunger, but if your diets do not have adequate micronutrients, iron, zinc, vitamin A, iodine, and more, we call it hidden hunger. So 5 billion out of 8 billion who suffer from lack of micronutrients. So you may look very good, some people even look very fat, but lack of key micronutrients.
They're not necessarily healthy in terms of their inputs.
They're not healthy at all. So that sort of hidden hunger is even more damaging than visible hunger, because you cannot observe. It affects children's mental, physical development. It affects productivity of adults. It affects the longevity of the elderly. So that's a challenge of so-called hunger and malnutrition. I think you ask me what is the immediate threat, immediate challenge. To me, this is the biggest challenge we face right now. Now, obviously, there are secondary or maybe related challenges, that is the climate change. Because over the last several decades, because of climate change, the food production productivity have been negatively affected.
Yes.
So the poor cannot produce enough food for themselves, and they cannot produce adequate food even for urban citizens. Droughts, floods, cyclones all affect their livelihoods, their production productivity, the income generation capacity, and so on. So climate change is another big threat challenge. So I'm very reluctant to rank which one is more important to me. They are interlinked, intertwined. So I would put these two together as the top priorities. So
and in fact, we would say in the context of resilience, which is how to better survive the volatility that is now endemic in the 21st century because of climate change, we need to make our societies and our populations stronger. But I'm interested in the micronutrients question. So how much of that is as a result of the construction of food availability in front of people's versus the nature of production or the nature of development of inputs? Well, what's the challenge there?
I think it's both. It's both. One is obviously lots of people cannot afford healthy and nutritious foods.
Right.
So, in fact, one of my colleagues from Australia, he quantified how many people who cannot afford healthy, nutritious diets. The number is shocking. It's 1.6 billion people. That's back even before COVID.
Right.
So, on the other hand, the production system, the global production system, have not been able to supply cheaper, lower price, that's healthy foods. But healthy foods are usually very expensive. Fruits, vegetables, and lack of investment in supply chain, lack of investment in R&D.
And so what are the solutions here?
Well, the solutions, well, obviously technology. So lots of good technology, good varieties that can continue to enhance yield, more production. On the other hand, the scientists also begin to add micronutrients into these food crops through so-called biofortification.
Right.
Biofortification to just even traditional breeding, traditional selection. So many local varieties have the high content of certain micronutrients, iron, zinc, vitamin A. So through selection, farmers, scientists can select so to nutrition intense foods, crops from the field. Now, obviously, scientists can also use breeding through modern biotechnology to further enhance the nutrition elements of certain foods. For example, I used to work for IPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute. We had a big program called Harvest Plus. So basically to use modern technology to enhance nutrition of certain crops. Even traditional breeding, vitamin A, zinc, iron can be added to rice, wheat, maize, all this, and the potato, sweet potato, all these major foods poor eat. So eating the same foods, they will be able to have more nutrients.
Have we had some successes so far in this area?
Right, yes, they have lots of very good successful stories. One is in India, the per minute. In southern rural India, many girls are anemic, basically lack of iron in their body, and partly because of their diets. Because they eat vegetables, they do not have money to buy the animal proteins, or access to animal proteins. The anemic rate there is so high, maybe 70%, 80%. So the international research institution like CGIR and ICRISAT, the International Center for Semi-Arid Areas, they work together to add iron into per minute. And these local citizens, just particularly girls, just eat per minute as usual. You don't need to do anything. But because of the added iron into per minute, the anemic rate was able to go down from 70% to 30%, 40%.
And how was the addition done? How does a replacement crop, what was the mechanics of achieving that outcome?
Yeah, so basically through breeding. For example, by nature, some per minute has higher content of iron.
So we had different seed stocks coming through,
exactly,
and then we had to convince the farmers to change the seed.
I must say that some of the global institutions like CGIR have a treasure, human treasure, that's the gene banks.
Yes, of course.
10 gene banks, maybe even more than 10 globally. Some in India, some in Africa, some in Latin America, some in Middle East. So we can harvest good genes from the gene banks. Some are drought, that's a resistance, disease resistance, heat tolerance, and nutrition, high nutrition. So scientists can bring all these genes to create a new variety. There are many ways to do it. You even don't need to go through GMO. Per minute is one. Beans, high iron beans in Rwanda.
Okay.
Then vitamin A maize in Africa. So I think right now probably millions, if not billion people who are already consuming so-called biofortified foods. So scientists are also working to bring new varieties that can resist or can continue to grow very good yield despite the droughts, heat, or sometimes even disease and pests.
And of course, we're going to see a lot of this sort of severe heat and droughts going forward. So that's a critically important piece of work. You've done a lot of work on supply chain of food as well, not just the agricultural production. And I guess my question to you is, in implementing these changes, because we have this astounding work that's been done over the last 70 years, really, in food production, in seed banks, coming up with new varieties, which continues to go as you describe. But getting that into the supply chain system, and how does this work, and what are the other priorities in the supply chain side of things? We hear about vast food waste, for example, but of course we've also got to shift utilization. We need the supply chain system to be using these crops that you're talking about and not other crops and so on. What are the challenges there?
Right. So I think over the last several decades, we have changed our concept from production to the whole food systems. So the food system really means all the food commodities, even some of the non-food commodities like cotton, fiber. So we call it agri-food systems. Food and agriculture usually overlap. I think probably 80% of agriculture is food. The remaining 20% is maybe beverages, fiber, and so on.
Like the coffee I'm drinking now.
Exactly. So we include all agri-food commodities, and also it covers the whole chain from input manufacturing to production to harvesting, transportation, processing, wholesaling, retailing, even to our household. In addition, the agriculture food production have externalities or have impact beyond food and agriculture, the environment, climate change, land, water, biodiversity, and on our health. So here we use so-called agri-food system to cover all this. I was involved in a study called Food System Economics Commission. 2 years ago, we published a report. So basically, we try to analyze the priorities you mentioned, and also where should be the interventions to really make sure that we can tackle some of the biggest challenges, setting the right priorities using the limited resources. So we have several findings. One is the hidden cost of the whole food system is about $10 trillion. So basically, the hidden cost from the environment, from health, is even bigger, or at least the same as your market value. Solution is the investment. If we can invest $500 billion, we can help the private sector to create $5 trillion business opportunities.
Sounds good. Tell me more. I'm skeptical. Come on.
Sure. Well, investment includes public investment, private investment. But right now, unfortunately, most of that investment is from the public.
What kind of investment are we talking about?
Well, for example, R&D.
That's a social benefit. I've got a community of global investors out there who are looking about how to apply their money to give returns for the pensions that they have to pay, whilst also doing good. How do you do that?
Right. So $500 billion investment, big part of that will come from the public. Right now, globally, in fact, agriculture sector spends about $700 billion to subsidize water, fertilizers, pesticides, or output price. So there is money, but it just spending wrong things to subsidize, let's say, more environmental degradation, loss of biodiversity, and also produce some foods that not necessarily help poor to address their malnutrition issues, because this subsidy usually produce rice, wheat, maize, not nutritious foods, vegetables, fruits, beans. And then one solution is, can we ask the government, public sector, to repurpose these subsidies to help the private, to navigate the private sector, and de-risk the private sector, and help to address some of the so-called market failures.
What sort of investments are we talking about here? Give me a flavour.
Yeah.
Where does the money actually go?
Right. So one is, as I said, R&D investment. So we needed to continue to generate technologies.
Go on.
That private sector can use. Okay. Then infrastructure, roads, internet. You need to make sure that every farmer has access to internet, because they can use internet
for information discovery, price discovery,
information, and market technology.
But that all helps further distribution of existing product. I'm curious about how we shift the different sorts of products.
Well, I think there are many technologies beyond the genetically modified. Modern technologies go far beyond that. So we call it version 5 biotechnology. That government, public sector needs to invest. But to invest to bring all this technology, then the private sector companies can take over. Now globally, there are some multinational companies like Syngenta, Corteva, and Bayer, and so on. But there are also many smaller companies here in China, maybe in Europe, in Africa, that can help to convert all this sort of version 5 breeding technologies into something that farmers can benefit, like seeds. And then, let's say, the processing part here in China, Southeast Asia, they use the rice millers as a key point to link millions of smallholders through contract, and then link to supermarkets, rice millers. So they make sure that farmers will use standardized seeds. Then when the rice millers got all the seeds, they process them well, and then link to supermarkets here in Beijing, Shanghai, maybe in Hanoi. I thought, well, rice obviously is only a small part. I think today, vegetables, fruits, beans probably are equally important, are very important that we have not paid enough attention. So building on the success from rice, we need to expand that to other commodities, and the private sector can do that. And the financing is a big part of that.
Is there scope for productivity improvement in green vegetables in the same way as we saw extraordinary advances in productivity with rice and wheat in the last 50 years? Is that, I mean, I'm looking for ways for farmers to make more money, really. Is that a possibility?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Partly because of lack of investment in this fruits, vegetables. If you look at public investment in R&D, public investment in infrastructure, in the past they were very much focused on several major grains, rice, wheat, maize. They have not invested in vegetable fruits. Look at the whole CGIAR Global Institute, there is none. And then if you look at the government policies, most governments subsidize rice, wheat, maize, and maybe cows, but not fruits, vegetables. In many cases, actually, they tax vegetables, fruits. Well, I'm not saying that we should stop supporting them. We support them. We make sure that we continue to produce good quality rice, wheat, maize, and low carbon probably. And can we switch our gear to support vegetables, fruits, beans, more nutritious, healthy foods? And by the way, if we do the right, these foods actually have lower carbon footprints than rice, wheat, and maize.
So I can see a future, inputs being higher quality to what we eat, a better distribution system, which presumably will also reduce wastage. But if we look 10 years, 15 years down the track, how do you see these changes manifesting itself? And what I'm really looking for is investment opportunities for the private sector.
Well, reducing food waste and loss is a big deal because globally we waste almost 1/3 of our foods. And the foods wasted usually are high value and actually involves more carbon emissions because you accumulate towards the end of your supply chain. There are many technologies, particularly digital AI technologies, can help to streamline the supply chain, optimize your supply chain, and big data, you know, where your consumers are, where your producers are, then you can make that link. Here in China, Alibaba has worked with some of the supply chains actors there. So they were able to reduce food loss and waste, let's say from 25% to 8%. Huge opportunity.
And is this packaging? You know, I'm conscious that there's one supermarket chain in the UK, Marks and Spencer's, that told me they had an environmental program. They ended up using much more packaging and stuff. They reduced their food waste, they said, from 25% down to about 8% by packaging with inert gases and so on. And as a result, stuff just didn't go off as quickly. And that's incredibly hot. But there was a trade-off. They were using more plastics.
Right.
And they're packaging. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
No, not necessarily. There are many things. Well, one is optimize the supply chain because now you can better distribute your products to certain markets where you know there's a demand. So that reduces the waste. And then obviously overpacking is a problem globally. And here in China, I do see that problem too. So that increases cost. It also increases carbon emissions. Now here I also wanted to make sure that we go to the consumers. The consumer demands. You're asking for the investment opportunities. So our diets, how can we change our diets? We overconsume red meat. We just do not eat enough vegetables, fruits. So that's why the malnutrition I mentioned, lack of micronutrients is a problem, but overweight, obesity is rising. So here in China, it's more than 50% of adults is either obese or overweight.
Astounding change in 2 generations, isn't it?
So here, changing diets can bring huge opportunity. If the private sector, the supply chain can help to set up all this more healthy and sustainable foods distribution to fit the demand of consumers. And here, packaging, information, and nudging people to change the behavior. We have done some study here, even in our university. How can we change students' behavior? So for example, bring some information to students. We call it information intervention. So basically ask students to read something, to watch something, like a video saying, oh, how damaging it is if you waste food, damaging to the environment, damaging to your health. Okay, they may listen, they may change their behavior for 2 or 3 days, but after 2 or 3 days, business as usual, they come back again. However, there's a disruptive technology, AI buffet service for here
Really?
in the university. When you bring a plate to pick up your food from each, that's a food item, the machine will automatically record your proteins, calories,
Oh,
fat,
is it right?
and then
You're
all
getting
this
constant feedback.
yes, all the money.
Wow.
And incidentally, red meat is more expensive.
Yes, of
Fruit,
course.
vegetables are cheaper. So students already optimize the consumption. And then we did a study, we observed. The first observation is students reduce their food waste drastically.
Wow.
They used to waste maybe 25%, 30% of their food. The second is they really begin to pay attention to their nutrition. If you have time, we'll be very happy to take you to that restaurant. So what I really mean is disruptive technologies can
make a
lead
big
to
difference.
Disruptive behavior change. This private sector can help to invest in these modern AI restaurants. So here in my university, we can do that in whole Chinese university. We can do that in all the public restaurants. Private sector companies provide a lunch for their staff. Huge investment opportunities for them.
So we will come to a conclusion here. Look, we have a challenge. The challenge I'm looking at is that we have pension funds and insurance funds around the world who are trying to optimize outcomes for us to pay our pensions when we retire, and are conscious of the problem of climate change, the problem of food insecurity, and the problem of greater default risk on the part of governments. This is a way of addressing all of these things. The healthier our societies are, the better our food supply chains, the more likely we are to be able to be productive, efficient, effective, successful societies, and to pay back debt.
Sure.
What we're hearing today is the incredible importance of bringing science to the table, because the only path forward is to understand what really works and to look at solutions that will make a lasting difference rather than a shallow difference. And this is a complicated issue. So the point about today is the interaction between capital, between science, and then to figure out the solutions that work.
I have been working with science, with the public sector. We really need the investors, whether it's a public, whether it's a pension funds, whether it's the private sector companies. I think there are several priorities. One is R&D to drive the innovation. But today's R&D, not just the production, but for better environment, nutrition, health, and to some extent, inclusion, resilience. The second one you already mentioned, the supply chain, to link producers to consumers, infrastructure, cooling chains. We must make sure that we can decarbonize the whole value chain. In many cases, mitigation and resilience come together. It's a win-win. And then finally, again, the consumers. So how can we make sure that consumers do consume their food healthily, nutritiously, and sustainably? Yes, we can always provide information, data, but investment to improve certain technologies in providing food services is essential. Public investment, as I said, $800 billion. That's, again, as a researcher, we can advise the government to use that money to leverage the private sector or pension funds or private companies to support the whole food system transformation. Better nutrition, better health, good environment, and low carbon.
Food system transformation. That's what the future holds for us.
Absolutely, yeah. Without that transformation, I'm afraid we will not be able to eat healthily, nutritiously. We'll not be able to address some of the challenges we just discussed, climate change or even conflicts.
And we won't be able, and we need to make a better life for all our citizens, and a healthier life and a more productive life as part of this. And your comments about micronutrients are extraordinarily interesting. That whole agenda of micronutrients is really important and fascinating, much more complex, a whole new area for me of thinking. Thank you for the time, and thank you for your work in this area. We're looking forward to working with you in the future to be able to bring capital and food and agricultural science together to create better futures.
Yep, thank you, Sean. I'm very confident if we work together, not just across different sectors, different countries. I mean, under the current geopolitical challenges, I think we must work together.